It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done using purely leverage and mechanical advantage.
In the Aswan quarries, where colossal granite blocks lie, official history tells a single story: copper, sand, and manpower. But ancient texts and local legends whisper a different truth: a liquid capable of melting granite like candle wax, a formula jealously guarded by priests. The proof is not found in the scratches of abrasion, but in the impossibly smooth surfaces, as if the stone itself was not cut, but rendered soft and then allowed to harden again. If modern science cannot replicate this feat, are we asking the wrong question? What if the true tool was never a solid object, but a chemical formula, now lost to time? The impossible case of the granite cuts. When we think about the incredible world of ancient Egypt, we almost always imagine the giant pyramids and the huge stone temples that have survived for thousands of years. And these amazing buildings were clearly made to last forever because they were built from some of the hardest stone found anywhere on Earth. The ancient Egyptians were masters of working with materials like granite and diorite, which are extremely strong and durable types of rock. To understand just how hard these stones are, scientists use a special system called the Mohs scale of hardness, which is a simple ranking from 1 to 10, where a diamond is the hardest at number 10. On this scale, the granite that the Egyptians used is ranked at a 6 or a 7, making it an incredibly difficult material to shape or to cut even with today's technology. The history books and the official story from mainstream archaeology give us a very simple explanation for how this was done, telling us that the ancient workers used simple hand tools that were made of copper. This is where our investigation begins, because this explanation presents a massive and very obvious problem that is impossible to ignore. The problem is a matter of basic physics, because copper is a very soft metal, and on that same Mohs scale of hardness, copper only ranks at about a 3. This means that the tool the Egyptians supposedly used was much softer than the stone they were cutting, which is like trying to cut a steel plate with a plastic knife. To get around this clear contradiction, the official explanation adds one more detail, suggesting that the workers poured sand, which contains hard quartz crystals, into the cut as they worked, and the soft copper tool was only used to push the sand back and forth to slowly grind the granite away over a very long time. This is the story we have been told for centuries, but the physical evidence left behind at the scene does not support this story at all. The evidence tells a completely different story, because if the sand grinding method were true, the surfaces of the cuts would be rough, uneven, and covered in scratches. But when you look at the real artifacts, the cuts are perfectly smooth, the corners are razor sharp, and the flat surfaces are almost optically perfect, which suggests they were sliced by a very sharp and powerful blade, not slowly ground down by sand. The evidence of the killer tool. The drill cores. To find the best clues in this investigation, we must look at some special artifacts that were discovered a long time ago by a very famous and respected archaeologist named Sir William Flinders Petrie. While he was carefully studying the ancient sites in Egypt, he found pieces of stone that are called drill cores. And a drill core is the cylinder of rock that is left behind on the inside when a hollow, tube-shaped drill cuts a hole into a larger block of stone. These small pieces of rock are some of the most important pieces of evidence in this entire mystery, because they hold the secrets of the tools that were used to shape them, almost like a fossil holds the secrets of an ancient animal. When Petrie and other researchers looked very closely at these granite drill cores, they found something amazing. They saw a continuous spiral line, like the threads on a screw, that went all the way down the side of the stone. This spiral line is a perfect fingerprint of the tool that made the cut, because it shows the exact path the cutting edge took as it turned and pushed its way down into the solid granite. Engineers who studied these spiral lines were able to calculate how fast the ancient drill was cutting, and their results were completely shocking. The evidence showed that for every single time, the drill made one full circle. It plunged deep into the granite, cutting at a rate that is incredibly fast, even for our most powerful modern drills today. This discovery creates a huge problem for the official story, because a simple copper tube is far too soft to cut granite at such a high speed while under so much pressure. If you tried to push a copper drill into granite that hard and that fast, the copper tool itself would be destroyed almost instantly. It would bend, get worn down to nothing, or even melt from the friction long before it could leave such a perfect and deep mark in one of the hardest stones on the planet. So these drill cores are hard proof. They are the undeniable evidence that the ancient Egyptians were using a cutting tool that was incredibly hard and incredibly powerful. This leads us to a very important test. If their tools and methods were so simple, then we should be able to copy their work today using those same simple tools. Failure in the lab. When modern times loses to the ancient past. Because the evidence from the ancient drill cores was so strong, many different scientists and engineers over the years have tried to conduct experiments to see if the official story could possibly be true. One of the most famous of these researchers was a man named Dennis Stocks, who spent a huge amount of his time in a workshop trying to perfectly recreate the tools and methods that mainstream archaeologists claim the ancient Egyptians used. He wanted to test the theory in the real world, to see if a soft copper tool and some sand could actually cut through solid granite and leave behind the same kind of perfect marks that we see on the ancient artifacts. His experiments were very careful and very detailed, as he built replicas of the copper tube drills and used the same types of quartz sand that are found in Egypt. For years, he tried again and again to drill into granite blocks using these simple tools, but every single time, the result was a complete and total failure. He discovered that the copper tool was so soft that it wore away much faster than the hard granite did, meaning the tool destroyed itself long before it could make a deep or clean cut. The cuts he managed to make were always very rough, very shallow, and looked nothing like the smooth, precise spiral lines found on the drill cores from thousands of years ago. He also found that the work was incredibly slow and difficult, and it took many hours of non-stop effort just to grind away a tiny amount of stone, which proves that the impossible cutting speed calculated from the ancient drill cores could never be achieved with this method. These failed experiments are extremely important because they show us that the official theory is not just unlikely, it is physically impossible. Modern people, with all of our knowledge and strength, cannot replicate the work of the ancient Egyptians when we use the tools that we are told they used. This means there must be a missing piece of the puzzle, a secret ingredient that we have overlooked. All of these failed experiments were based on one big assumption, the assumption that the tools were made of ordinary, soft copper. But we have proof that the Egyptians knew about and used much stronger and more special metals. Because inside the tomb of the famous pharaoh Tutankhamun, archaeologists found a beautiful dagger with a blade that was not made of copper or bronze. It was made of iron that came from a meteorite, a metal that fell from the sky. This proves that the Egyptians had access to superior metals, which forces us to ask a new and very serious question. What if their copper tools were not really copper at all? Reopening the copper file. A century-long mistake. This is the moment in the investigation where we have to challenge a very big and very old idea. An idea that has been the foundation of our understanding of ancient history for over 100 years. We often hear history being divided into different ages based on the materials people used, such as the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. The official story places ancient Egypt firmly inside the Bronze Age, which is the period when people learned how to mix two different metals together to create a new, stronger metal called an alloy. The most famous alloy from this time is bronze, which is made by mixing copper with a small amount of tin. Bronze is definitely harder and better than pure copper. But even bronze is still not hard enough to cut granite at the speeds and with the precision that we see on the ancient Egyptian artifacts. But this is where a critical piece of information has been overlooked. Because before the common tin bronze was widely used, there was another, much older, and much stronger type of alloy that ancient people knew how to make. This special metal is called arsenical copper, or sometimes arsenical bronze. It is an alloy made by mixing copper not with tin, but with a different element called arsenic. When you mix the right amount of arsenic with copper, you create a new metal that is incredibly hard and strong, much harder than pure copper and even harder than the tin bronze that came later. This is a scientific fact. And the most interesting part of this clue is that the ancient mines that the Egyptians used in their eastern desert were naturally full of rock ores that contained both copper and arsenic mixed together. This leads us to our new theory, a theory that fits all the evidence we have seen so far. What if the tools we have found in the museums, the tools that have been simply labeled as copper or bronze, are actually made from this secret, super hard arsenical copper alloy? This would mean that the ancient Egyptians were not just simple metal workers, they were master metallurgists, people who had a deep and advanced knowledge of chemistry and how to create special materials. But working with arsenic is extremely dangerous because arsenic is a powerful poison. This means that the knowledge of how to create this super metal would have been a very closely guarded secret, known only to a small and elite group of craftsmen. If this secret knowledge was so important and so dangerous, it would have been treated like a national secret. Which also means that if something happened to those few people who knew the formula, the secret could be lost forever. The signs of decay. When the recipe was forgotten, now that we have our main suspect, the secret arsenical copper alloy, we can use this theory to look at the entire timeline of ancient Egypt and see if it helps us solve an even bigger puzzle. When we look at the very long history of ancient Egypt, which lasted for almost 3,000 years, we find a very strange and confusing pattern. This pattern is a major clue, and it is the exact opposite of what we would normally expect to see in the development of a civilization. Usually, technology and skills get better over time as people learn from their ancestors and invent new and better ways of doing things. But in ancient Egypt, the evidence in the stone seems to show that their most advanced and most precise stone-cutting skills appeared in their earliest history, and then slowly got worse over time. The oldest and most impressive stonework, like the perfectly cut boxes inside the Great Pyramid and other sites from the period called the Old Kingdom, shows the highest level of mastery. The surfaces are flawless, the angles are perfect, and the cuts are incredibly clean. But when you look at the granite work from later periods, like the Middle Kingdom or the New Kingdom, which came hundreds or even thousands of years later, you often see that the quality of the work is actually lower. The cuts are not as clean, the surfaces are not as flat, and the overall precision is not as good as the work done by their distant ancestors. This strange decline in skill makes perfect sense if our theory about a secret and dangerous formula is correct. Knowledge that is only known by a very small group of people is very easy to lose forever. If the few master craftsmen who knew the secret recipe for the arsenical copper died in a war or a plague without passing on their knowledge, then that incredible technology would simply vanish. This suggests that the later Egyptian craftsmen were looking at the incredible works of their ancestors and were trying to copy them. But they simply could not do it because the secret formula for the super hard tools had already vanished from the world. They were left with inferior tools, like regular tin bronze, and could only make poorer quality copies of the old masterpieces. This decline in quality proves that the secret was not a common skill, but a lost legacy. They had lost the recipe. This explains why later tools were less effective. But it also opens the door to an even bigger question. A tool, no matter how hard it is, is only part of the solution. To create the perfectly flat surfaces and the perfectly square corners that we find inside the granite boxes of the Serapeum, you need more than just a good cutting blade. You need a machine. Alloy plus machine equals the buried truth. Now is the time in our investigation to bring all the clues together and present the full theory. A complete explanation that finally makes sense of all the confusing and contradictory evidence. The great secret of the ancient Egyptians was not just one single thing. It was a complete and advanced system of technology that was made up of two equally important parts. If you are missing one of these parts, the entire system fails, which is why modern experiments have never been able to replicate their incredible work. The first part of this system was their technology of materials. As we have discussed, the Egyptians were not just using simple copper. They had secretly mastered the science of metallurgy and had developed a special formula to create the super-hard arsenical copper alloy. This secret material gave them cutting tools that were hard enough and strong enough to slice through solid granite with amazing speed and efficiency. This was the blade that was sharp enough for the job. But a sharp blade is useless if the hand holding it is unsteady. This brings us to the second, and equally important, part of their system, their technology of mechanics, to achieve the impossible level of precision that we see in their work. The Egyptians must have also invented and used complex machines to guide and control their powerful cutting tools. We are not talking about simple hand drills. We are talking about stable and powerful machines like lathes, which spin an object so a tool can cut it perfectly, and milling machines, which move a tool in a very precise and controlled way. These machines would hold the cutting tool perfectly steady, apply a huge amount of constant pressure, and guide the cut with a level of accuracy that a human hand could never achieve. The reason we have never found these amazing machines is most likely because they were built primarily out of wood. Wood is a very strong material, perfect for building machine frames, but it is also an organic material that rots away and disappears over thousands of years, leaving almost no trace behind for archaeologists to find. So, the complete secret was the combination of a super hard cutting tool and a powerful, precise machine to control it. Such a complex system of machines could not have appeared from nowhere. Machines need parts. They need components that are designed for a specific mechanical purpose. Even if the wooden frames of these machines are gone forever, is it possible that a critical component, made of a material that does not rot, has survived and been found by archaeologists who just did not know what they were looking at? The rogue component, the ultimate proof. Our search for a surviving machine part now takes us to a real artifact, an object that you can see today in the Cairo Museum, and it is perhaps the single most confusing and unexplainable object ever discovered from the ancient world. This object is officially called the schist disk of Sabu, and it was discovered in 1936 by the archaeologist Walter Bryan Emery inside a tomb at the ancient site of Saqqara. At first glance, it looks like some kind of strange, fancy bowl or plate. But when you look closer, you realize that its shape makes no sense for a bowl. The object is a round disc, carved from a single piece of a dark stone called schist, and it has a very strange and very specific design, with a central hub for a shaft to go through, and three thin, curved lobes that bend backwards in a way that looks incredibly modern. It looks exactly like a piece of a complex machine, almost identical to a part that engineers today would call an impeller, which is the spinning part inside a pump that is designed to push water or air. Now, to understand why this disc is the ultimate proof, we must talk about the material it is made from, because the stone itself tells us a huge part of the story. The disc is carved from schist, and schist is a metamorphic rock, which means it is formed in very thin layers. And because of these layers, the stone is extremely fragile and brittle. It breaks apart very, very easily if you are not careful. to carve such a complicated shape? With 3 thin, curving blades and a delicate central hub. Out of a stone that shatters so easily is a manufacturing problem that many modern engineers believe is impossible to solve using only simple hand tools like stone pounders or copper chisels. Any attempt to hammer or chip away at this material to create such a precise and delicate shape would cause the entire object to break into 100 pieces long before it was finished. The schist disk of Sabu is not a bowl, and it is not a ceremonial lamp. Its shape is a shape of pure mechanical function, and the material it is made from proves that it had to have been created with some kind of advanced technology. This disk is the physical proof of the machines we have been looking for. It is the surviving component of a lost technology. When you put this evidence together with the evidence from the drill cores, which proved the existence of a super hard cutting tool, a complete picture finally appears. We now have the evidence for the machine and the evidence for the tool. So the final question is no longer how they did it, but a much deeper one. Why would a civilization with such advanced knowledge allow it to completely disappear from history, leaving almost no written record of their greatest technological achievement? The forgotten legacy, the history that needs to be rewritten. So now we have finally reached the end of our investigation, and the conclusion is not a story of magic or visitors from other planets, but a story of a real and forgotten peak of human ingenuity in science and engineering. The incredible secret of the ancient Egyptians was a complete system, a powerful combination of their mastery over materials and their mastery over mechanics. They had the secret recipe for a super-hard arsenical copper alloy that gave them cutting tools strong enough for the job. And they had the knowledge to build complex wooden machines that could guide those tools with perfect, non-human precision. This 2-part system is the only logical explanation that fits all of the physical evidence that we have examined. From the impossible cuts on granite boxes to the strange mechanical shape of the schist disk of Sabu, this conclusion solves the question of how they did it. But it leaves us with the final and most important question of all. Why did this incredible technology disappear so completely from the world? The answer is most likely because the knowledge was extremely specialized, extremely dangerous, and therefore, it was kept extremely secret. The formula for the poison alloy and the designs for the machines were probably known only to a very small and elite group of master craftsmen. A kind of secret society of ancient engineers. Knowledge that is not written down and shared widely is very fragile. And if that small group of experts was lost to history, their secrets would die with them. The valuable metal tools would have been melted down and recycled over thousands of years, and the great wooden machines would have simply rotted away in the desert, leaving nothing behind for us to find except for their astonishing creations. The evidence for their greatest technology was not written on fragile papyrus scrolls that could burn or decay. Instead, they left their proof carved into the hardest and most permanent materials on Earth. They did not leave us the blueprints for their machines. They left us the finished products. And the existence of these products is a kind of reverse blueprint, a message across the ages that tells us what they were capable of. The greatest secret of the Bronze Age might just be that for a short and brilliant time in history. For the people who built the pyramids. It was not the Bronze Age at all. It was the age of a completely different and far more advanced technology. A brilliant but dangerous chapter of human history that was almost completely erased.